Alright, so we're here in shot 30, and this one is a little bit similar to a previous shot, also a flip shot, but there's a couple of interesting things, I think, with this shot that you might not have known before. So if we look at the actual shot, so we have the camera here on the cookie, and then we have the chocolate. So you can see first it pours over, and then it sort of wraps underneath. So we're going to learn how we can do that. And another thing, it's not super clear, but there's a little bit of detailing on the specular. It's actually not that obvious, but depending on how you want to sort of approach this, might still be interesting to sort of have me explain how you could get that detailing on your specular. So let me just go into Houdini, and let's just split this up first. So let's grab all of this stuff here from subnetwork and just paste it out here, just like we did with the previous thing. So let's go into our cookie and let's remove all of this stuff, and let's just load our cookie here. So let's go file, go to $root/assets. There we go to models and load in our cookie bar. And there's another thing actually that we also need to load, which will be the caramel. So I guess let's just copy and paste our cookie. Just call that caramel, because we need to drop it over the caramel, right? So this will be in a different location. We don't think we published this. I guess we can just grab it from the shot location. So that will be 20 geo caramel mesh. Let's just go in there. Right, we have the caramel mesh going on here, which is slightly offset for some reason. Just put it like that. Doesn't really matter that much for this shot. Right. So again, it's maybe a little bit thick, like on my original here. I had it pour in a little bit more, but that's just something you can play around with your own sim. So we have these two. Let's time offset this a little bit, because we don't want this to start in the beginning, of course. We want this to be near the end. So I guess we could type $F. So put a time shift and put this to +100. Let's see what this is going to be. And let's clamp to last. I guess we could say, I'm not sure what the last frame was from the sim. Something like this seems to work. So we'll have that, and then we can pour the stuff on later. Maybe we want to do a little bit more. Right, so something like that. Still a little bit jittery, so you might want to work on your own caramel here, but it'll depend on your setup. Right, so caramel, cookie. So let's, I guess, load these both into our flip here. So let's go put cookie in there. That's two objects. Let's do caramel in there. Right. And don't necessarily think we need a changing topology on the collision. I guess we can just time shift this. Just time shift it at like frame 30, because it's not really gonna noticeable. Or let's do 34. That it's not completely moving. So I guess for collision that should be fine. Just keep it at 1 frame. Right. So now let's template this. Go to the side view and grab our emitter, and let's look through it. So right, side view. All right, so let's move it to a more appropriate location. It's gonna pour over it, something like that. Seems to be okay. Maybe we want it to be a little bit more to there. Let's make it a straight curve. And now we need to deal with a couple of things, because like I mentioned, need to have it pull over. And also another nice thing is, like I mentioned, maybe we want something in there so we can add some detailing to our specular, even though it's not too noticeable in here. Might be nice to know how you can do that. So a couple of things we need to change here, because right now, of course, if we're just going to play this, we're going to end up with the same that we had before. So it's going to pour over it, and it's going to sort of stick on the ground. Which actually might also work, but I'm just gonna show it the way that I did it initially. And by the way, the viscosity should probably be a little bit different. And this thing I think should start a little bit more over here. All right, so let me just show you how I did it in my setup. So instead of using gravity, I'm going to disable gravity. We're gonna do something completely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a stop solver. And stop solver will allow you to do stop level operations inside of DOPS. So we can dive in here and then we can see the points. So the points from our simulations, if we were to sim ahead a little bit, well, of course, no, where nothing is really happening because we don't have any gravity, but we can see them over here. And what we want to do, let's just go back, is object merge our cookie in here. And our caramel to this object. Right, so what we want to do is, let's make a wrangle. And we want to apply a force from these points to the surface. Let's, by the way, also make a time shift here. Let's time shift it at frame 40 or something. So, because if we do that, what will kind of happen is it will make a force to the surface and then it will kind of droop over it. But if it goes under it, it will still make a move towards the surface. And we can also sort of increase the force, maybe if it's further away from the surface. So if it's like close to the surface, then it's going to be sort of, well, slow. And then if it's further away, it's going to be fast. So kind of like just a very simple wrangle that we're going to type. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to just say vector pos. So you're just going to placeholder variable equals min pos. And min pos will give the minimum position of a second input. So if we say second input, which is this one, and add p, it's going to draw a vector. So kind of like an invisible line from these points to the surface. And we kind of want to fit this. So we want to say maybe what we want to do is, actually we don't want to do that yet. What we want to do is we want to make another vector called directory, so dir, and we want to say current position minus pos. So that will give us a vector from here. It's kind of going to be negated. And then what we want to do is we want to calculate the length of that vector. I can visualize this, by the way, if you want. So I can say v at n equals dir. So just so you can see what's going on. So you can see we get a vector in the opposite direction. So let's calculate the length of that vector. So let's do float len equals the length of dir. Length. All right. So it's going to calculate the length. So if it's further away, it's going to be longer. And then probably what we want to do is we want to fit this at some point. Maybe let's first just write it out. V at force equals dir times len. By the way, we want to not do that. We want to minus equals it to. So now it's going to subtract from the existing force. It's going to subtract this direction. Kind of wonder why we want to subtract, because it was negated, right? It was in the opposite direction. So probably want to fit len as well. So len equals, let's say fit len. So from 0 to, let's just put something here. We could write this out, I guess, maybe first to check how long it is. So f at len equals len. See what the maximum length is. 0.48. Let's just use 1 then. just in case if it increases if we start emitting from higher, for example. So if at len equals fit len 0, 1, and let's increase it to 2 and 12. Right, so, and by the way, we can just do this like that. All right, so now we're going to get a force between 2 and 12. So that's going to be this thing. The length. So we're going to multiply the direction by the length and then subtracting it to the force. So let's just see what this will do. All right, so let's just do it like that, and let's just play. Probably need to change our viscosity a little bit, by the way, because our viscosity is probably way too high. Yeah, it's way too high. So let's go into flip. And let's just do a very low viscosity, something like 5 or something. Probably need to start increasing our, and what we need to do is we need to turn off closed boundaries, and let's also increase our resolution already so we can kind of see a little bit better what's going on. And we need to grab this thing and move it down, because of course we don't want it to, else it's going to kill it off once it gets out there, and we kind of want to see what's going to happen when this is going to move over. So it's not completely doing what we wanted to do. Yeah, it's doing it a little bit. You can see it's gonna turn, starting to get a little bit slow, but probably we wanted to sort of speed up a little bit more, if I'm honest. Just play. So what we could maybe say, so let's have a look at our grid, that if it's gonna be below this line here, so below 0, let's increase the amount of pull that this force has. What we could maybe do is that if p dot y is below minus 0.2 or something, then we want to say that, let's just do it above here. Then len times equals 4. All right, so let's see what this does. Yeah, you can see it now pulling under it a lot faster. Let's just look through our camera. Probably the thing that we're still missing here, as you can see, it's sort of not moving over here as fast as we want. So maybe we want to do it, reintroduce our gravity, but only a little bit. Let's put it maybe to -2. Just see what this will do. So now we still will have the gravity force. Oh, probably that's way too much. And maybe we can also increase our viscosity a little bit again. So -0.5 maybe. Okay, it's too high viscosity. Again, it's just playing with these values until you get something that you kind of like. Right, so still not completely perfect, but it's about what I want. So I figured I'd just go over it. I might tweak it a little bit more, but what I did is I increased the viscosity to 65. I have stops over here, increased this multiplier here. Gravity is a little bit higher. And then we end up with something like this. So if you just look through the camera, you see, you probably need to change it a little bit more still, but because it's not completely covering it. But of course, we also still need to do our high resolution sim. But if you just look through here, You can see it, yeah, it sort of wraps nicely around the underside here. Not completely over here, but I think that's probably fine because, I mean, we don't see that side anyway. So we probably want to play around with the filtering here as well. But before we do our final sim, there's actually a couple of other things that we also need to take into account. Because like I mentioned, we also want to have some control over the sort of the specular on the chocolate and maybe add some detailing to that, or even displacement if you want to do that. And in order to do that, we need some rest positions, but on fluids that gets a little bit more complicated. So I figured I'd also briefly go into how that works. So what we need to do is over here by the inflip, let's add a rest because we need to do this before we do the simulation. So this will add rest on our points. So if you can see, we get rest here. So I also want to change a couple of other parameters for our flip simulation before we do the actual simulation. So I want to go into particle motion reseeding and then turn on reseed particles. It's probably already on, but what I want to do is I want to increase the surface oversampling quite significantly. So what this will do is if you have gaps in your fluid, it's probably because there's not enough particles there. So reseeding reseeds the particles in the voxel, so it adds extra particles on every substep. If you really crank on the oversampling, it will really fill it up, which can be quite nice for like thick stuff like chocolate, for example. So let's really crank that up. So we have this rest. This rest will get sourced into this thing. Another thing we want to do is we want to put down a fluid compress to compress our fluids. We did that before. And we want to link up our particle separation. You can see I put the particle separation to 0.01, by the way. So something like that. I'm not sure. I think I changed a couple of other parameters in the meantime. So I have my viscosity set to 55. I have, where is it? This thing set to multiply by 8. So I changed a couple of things. So, but like again, it will depend on your own settings, how you have to tweak this. But this will probably give a nice result for me. What I probably need to do is, if I go over here, let me just check if everything loads correctly. So if I just select this, let's see if rest will actually come true. So it doesn't look like rest is loading here. Let's try with the .io. And let's put this thing in here. And let's put flip object in there. And let's do flip fluid. Select that thing. Right, now if I play, you can see rest is loading. So, not sure why it's not loading when I check it over here. Oh, it was actually loading. Okay. So is it the fluid compress? That's messing it up. Let's check in here. All right, we need to keep the rest. Let's try with a .io again. It's a little bit weird here that the fluid compress is messing up the rest. Oh, that's because, yeah, never mind. Sorry, because it's compressed, of course, it's not gonna show up. But if I unpack it later, so if I unpack it here, it should be there. All right, anyway, so my bad. Let's just save this out. Gonna do 150 frames, and then I'll report back when it's done. Okay, so we got a nice looking sim here. So you can see it's you can see the reseeding makes a ton of difference because now it looks a lot better. So let's put this thing to surface polygons. We had it to surface VDB before, but let's put it to surface polygons because I want to demo the well, essentially what is happening with the rest, because we have to rest now. And let's just put a attribute VOP so we can kind of show you the whole thing. So let's put a terminal noise. Let's bind the rest in here. Rest. And let's just put it into color. Let's promote this stuff. All right, let's just have a look. Rip. And yeah, so now we're using the rest that we simulated with the thing to put in the noise. And if we just flipbook this, so let me just, I don't have another flipbook open. All right, let's just flipbook this. So you can kind of see what the deal is. So I'm flipbooking it from frame 50 and onwards. So you can see now, because we're using the rest, we can sort of, it's animating this noise pattern through the surface. That will mean that in the shader later, we can add some variation in here. Because maybe we don't want it to be perfectly specular. I guess maybe you want, but I always like breaking stuff up a little bit. So that's why we need to rest. You can see this looks quite nice actually. Right, so let's continue a little bit here. So let's add the logo thing. Right, so let's just go into the surface here. And let's put it back to surface VDB, because we want it to be a VDB, right? Because we have to add the logo. So we have this logo here. And let's just go in there and let's see what it does from the get-go. So we animated it into go until frame 40. So it doesn't look like it's positioned correctly yet. So let's just grab that thing. Let's move it up a little bit. Right. So maybe we want to move it to the side a little bit, because maybe it'll look a little bit better. Right. And I guess maybe we need to have the camera be a little bit different, if I'm honest, because we do want to look sort of onto the logo a little bit more. So maybe something like that. All right. And all right, so problem here is if we convert it now, we don't really have our rest anymore. What we can do is we can use attribute transfer. Attribute transfer to transfer these attributes. No, not from there. Let's just do it from the points. Let's transfer rest. All right, so now we should have, let me increase this. Now we should have, if I put this back into my visualizer thing. Let's see, does this actually convert it to polygons? Yes, it does. Let me see why this is looking a little bit weird. Let me just copy and paste this, put it to polygons. I see what's up with this. All right, so here this does work. Oh yeah, what I need to do is here I need to unpack, because remember we had a compressed cache there, so we need to unpack these points. Else we cannot really transfer them, because on the packed stuff there's not any rest. So if we didn't do that on here, so we're gonna transfer the rest from the unpacked thing. So now we should, yeah, so now it should look fine here. So maybe need to play a little bit with these settings. It looks a little, no, actually it looks quite fine. So I'm just going through this. Again, right now there's, of course, we're limited by the point count here, but in the shader we can use subdivisions and stuff. And again, it's going to be very minimal what we're going to do, so doesn't matter that much. But let's just file cache this out. Just call this chocolate sim, or chocolate mesh, sorry. And it's going to be a little bit heavier because we are keeping the, we don't really have a lot of adaptivity. I could increase the adaptivity, but then we're also somewhat losing the detail on the rest. So I'm not sure if I want to do that. I think I just want to keep it like that, so we have all of the detail. It's going to be a little bit heavier with the render, but it's not that heavy of a render in general, so it should be fine. Let's just cache this out to frame 150. And I'll be right back when that is done. Okay, so it's cached out. And if we just move through it, you can see the noise nicely moving through it. So that's looking pretty good. So you can see how much it it looks like the receding and stuff. It just adds a lot, and it just looks cool. Also how it sort of wraps underneath it. You can see how easy it is to sort of make these custom type effects. So another thing that we need to do is we need to change these nuts, because right now they're just spheres and we probably want them to look a little bit better. So let's just change these up a little bit. So right now it's just a sphere. So maybe what we want to do is just add something more interesting to it, and maybe do some variations on this thing as well. So let's do a material fracture. Like that. And let's say detail, add detail. By the way, let's add a little bit more over there. Let's do an exploded view. So maybe a little bit smaller edge detail or detail size. Yeah, so something like that. So let's for now let's just pick two that we like, and then we're gonna copy them randomly to these points. So let's just assemble this thing. Create packed. Select two that we like. So I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe this one looks cool. Leave not selected. Let's do another one. Maybe this one. Leave not selected. You could do more, but for now let's just do two. All right. And let's merge these two together. And we need to do a match size as well. So they're going to be in the center. Probably want to do that for every single one. Right, so now they're both in the center here. And what if we copy this to these points that we already had? Then what it's going to do is let me just change the P scale a little bit. It's going to copy the group of these two, which we probably don't want. But what we can do is let's remove the mountain here. We have this variant attribute. By the way, we can pack this. And if we enable that, nothing happens, but we need to create a variant. So the copy to points will, with this attribute, you can specify which copies go where. So let's do an attribute adjust float, I think it's called. So this is new in Houdini 18. And what I can do with this, I can say variant, so I can give it a name. Let's do let's maybe attribute adjust integer. Sorry, this is a different node. We need to be an integer. So let's put this one here. And this is also just built together from some other nodes, but these are quite nice and new in Houdini 18. Just make it easier to do stuff like this. So it's called variant. It's already set that up by default because they expect you to probably use that for stuff like this. And what we can do is put it to random and then put the max value to, let's say, to 1. So what this will do is we'll create a variant from 0 to 1. And because we have two inputs here, it will create variations between the two. We could do another one if we wanted to. We could add another one. Let's say this one, and change this one to be from 0 to 2. And now we have 3 variations. So let's just turn off this packed. You can see we get some nice variations here. Let's also do another attribute randomize. We didn't really have an orientation yet. So let's say orient. So some nice orientation. And what we had here is we did the animation with this thing. I think we're going to change that. We're going to just do it with a wrangle, which I think is going to be a little bit nicer. we're just gonna want to sort of randomly animate them down. So let's say float r equals random based on the point number. So we're gonna generate a random value between 0 and 1 based on the point number. Then we're gonna set p.y, so the y position minus equals r times channel float. Type it offset. So if we press this, you can see we can sort of randomly offset them. So that's going to be quite nice. And let's fit this r equals fit01. Let's fit it from r, let's fit it to 0.5 to 1. So it's not as extreme. So something like this probably looks a bit cooler. There's a little bit of randomization in the way that they're sort of moving down. So let's just go in here. Let's just animate these things in. So at the last couple of frames. So here the logo appears, and then we're gonna do. Right, so something like that. Let's change this camera up a little bit because I think it stops just before frame 150. So something like that looks pretty cool. So what we could do, I guess, is flipbook this and just see what it looks like in the animatic. So shot 30. Let's select our proper cameras. This thing always keeps jumping back. Let's choose OBJ. Let's force objects to be the cookie, the caramel, and the nuts. And let's just flipbook this and see what it looks like in the edit. So there we go. Whoop. I've changed the timing of the nuts a little bit here, but if we now go to, so they come in a little bit earlier, and the logo also comes in a little bit earlier, but if we now go to Premiere, so you can see I might need to offset it even a little bit more. So we get something like this. So probably maybe what I still want to do is make the speed of these falling nuts a little bit slower. So I'm gonna change that up a little bit and put them a little bit earlier. So we have some time here to sort of troop the chocolate a little bit over. But aside from that, I think it's looking pretty good. So I'm just gonna quickly change that, and then after that we can go to the next chapter. Okay, so I offset the timing a little bit, and now it's working quite well. So you can see, like in the beginning here, we have it sort of trooping over. We still have this thing going on a little bit. And you have the final sort of, just a hint of that. Those nuts are about to fall on the chocolate. I mean, we don't need to do a lot, but the main idea that we want to sort of convey is that you can already sort of see them falling before you go over here, else it's just a weird cut that there's suddenly something falling from the sky. So that's why we're doing that. So I'd say looking pretty good. Let's move on to the next shot, which of course is going to be this shot where they're sort of falling down, and we don't need to do that much on that shot because it's already working quite well, but there's still some things like we need to have the logo in there, need to add some detail to these nuts, we need to have them, need to of course have the chocolate layer down there, but it will be a pretty straightforward shot. So hopefully I'll see you there.